Warning, the following podcast may occasionally contain strong language and material that is not suitable for all ages. If you are easily offended, it is highly advised that you turn back now. However, if you're a degenerate, welcome, brethren. You've found your home.
You're listening to Wine, Dine, and Storytime, a podcast that shares stories of true crime, shocking mysteries, and strange occurrences. We do this within a dinner with friends theme. I'm Nydia, the one who called bullshit.
And I'm Dana, the one who changed her mind.
And I'm Cindy, just sitting here with popcorn watching it all unfold.
On our 100th episode, we covered a story chosen by a listener, Tony, of TikTok. Mm-hmm. And she asked us to cover the story of the Signal Mountain murders, which just so happened in her backyard, right?
Her local lawlessness.
Exactly. The episode was called We Spill the Tennessee Tea. Mm-hmm. So if you want to take a listen on that, you'll find... If you haven't
listened, right, hop
on over to that episode, because during that episode, Dana and I took two very different positions. On the same topic.
We certainly did.
Yes, not on anything else, just on the topic. So Dana did an internet search of local news stories, and she used reports and things that she found on Wikipedia and stuff. And I listened to Frank Casteel's son, who he wrote a book. His name is Trevor Casteel, and the book was called Statement of Facts.
Right.
And in this book, he used actual court transcripts and things that were happening locally to him and his dad, and as things unfolded. So
he basically stated the facts in his book.
Right. He does use a lot of facts in his book. Mm-hmm. All right. Basically, the evidence that was taken into court, the witness testimonies, things like that.
He systematically disproves the entire prosecution through his book, really, is what happens.
Well, and he doesn't do that. The evidence itself does.
Right, yeah, the evidence does.
You know? Yeah. I mean, the evidence and the mishandling of evidence does for itself. And we made a point to say that we didn't take a side either way.
Right.
But the way that the legal system works in the United States is that if there is reasonable doubt, then you must be
acquitted.
Right. If there is reasonable doubt, you have to be acquitted.
Not only that, but you're entitled to a speedy trial. You're entitled to an attorney that's going to do what you say and what you want. And wherever you land at the end of this episode, at the end of the last time we discussed this case, I think we both could agree that he was not awarded the rights of what a citizen should expect within the justice system in the United States.
Right. When we aired the episode, one of our worst nightmares happened. Mm-hmm. Trevor Casteel, the son of Frank Casteel, remember he's the one that was accused of the murders. And convicted of the murders. Mm-hmm. He reached out to us on Facebook. And
our buttholes puckered.
Yep, it did. Yes, it did. He just told us that he appreciated us showing both sides of the story. Uh-huh. And he corrected us on a couple of things. And he just talked about how unfair the media had treated the story.
Right.
In all fairness, we were fine with him calling us out because we try to get the details of the story as accurate as possible. Right. Sometimes that's not possible.
With the information that we're given, we really do try to get it. Try to get it right.
Right. So we've been in contact with Trevor since then, and we offered him an opportunity to come on the show and tell his story.
Right.
And we're going to let him tell his story. We pre-recorded an interview with him because he's all the way out in, I believe, Tennessee. Right?
Yeah.
He couldn't be here, so through Zoom.
He just sort of walks us through the book and sort of walks us through what we got wrong and what he believes many podcasts and TV shows got wrong and just where the misinformation fell.
We're going to play that recording for you and explain a little bit afterwards.
But first,
the food. Bless us, O patrons, for these thy gifts which we are about to receive from thy donations through Patreon every month. Podcast.
Cult.
All right.
That came from the gut.
Deep from the gut. Our episode's going to be a little bit different this week because we pre-recorded with Trevor. And when I say pre-record, that means I forgot to hit record when we first started recording and I fucked it all up. So we already recorded this once and we're going to do it again. Cindy made us some food, but we're not going to have a whole meal like we did because we already did the Tennessee thing with Tony. So what do we have here?
I did a charcuterie board, and this time I did it a light one. No meat flowers for this, but I did do some pinwheels with Genoa and provolone. And there's pepperoni and some soft creamy cheddar and some goat cheese with lavender honey and some red pepper jelly.
Yeah.
Grapes and strawberries and crackers.
She's
and
over here pandering
all
to these
kinds of
bitches.
stuff, and some smoky cheese too. We're drinking whiskey sours because, of course, if we're in Tennessee, we're gonna have some Jack Daniel's Tennessee whiskey.
Now, my whiskey sour is gone. It's very good. I have a little cherry floating in the bottom that I'm going to eat in just a second here. Since I fucked up the recording, we're also already having dessert. So that's why you're not hearing Nydia, because she is literally stuffing an ice cream sandwich in her gut. And she's covered in ice cream and sprinkles, and she's making a huge mess.
Well, first it's going in my mouth hole.
Did you make these cookies?
Hell no.
Hell no. She literally took 2 cookies and stuffed some ice cream and put sprinkles on the edge.
I got the good cookies. I got Pepperidge Farm cookies.
Yeah, they're soft but frozen.
Yes, because ice cream. So
I can't bite the top one.
well, the top one I took and melted chocolate, and I smeared a layer of chocolate on top just to give that feeling of those moon pies that I gave you guys from the first
Tennessee
episode, which was the moon pie. So I wanted to give that feel of that.
Yeah, I feel it. I'm feeling it.
Well, this was a beautiful spread that she did for us. You know that I'm enjoying food when I'm not talking much.
She also downed that whiskey sour.
Yeah. Great job. All right, so let's get to the interview with Trevor. Let's see what you guys think. Hello, Trevor. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fine.
We already had a little intro, but we talked about how you contacted us after you heard our first episode covering this case.
Yes.
When I spoke to you on the phone, it sort of made us have mini heart attacks because we definitely care deeply about our podcast and the story and how it affects people. So we are actually really excited to be talking to you and letting you tell your whole story here today.
Most people, when I contact them, they don't really pay that much attention to me. So it's a pleasant surprise to have somebody actually care that their content might have been some wrong, or there's content all over the internet about this case that I've contacted in WikiLeaks, for instance. There's a ton of stuff on WikiLeaks that's just incorrect. I've tried to correct it, but it never sticks. So, I mean, it seems like a lot of people just don't care that they got the information wrong, or they just don't believe me.
No, I appreciate you saying that, because we're just like 3 ladies in a room talking about things that actually affect other people. So yeah, we do want to make sure everybody gets the chance to be heard. And also, this is your life and it affected you, and that's important to us. And I do feel really terrible that you've reached out to other places and they haven't given you the space to say how you feel or say what you know to be true or whatever.
I don't blame anybody for getting something wrong, because there's so much misinformation out there. I guess that's probably one of the biggest draws to writing the book, was that simple fact that there was just, I mean, even when I started writing the book, I mean, there was misinformation out there. Now there's even, it seems like it's growing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say, like, if you listen to that first episode, I only took information from the internet and Wikipedia and local sources, and Nydia listened to your book, and we were on 2 polar sides of the story. So I have since listened to the book, and we have some questions for you, if that's all right, if we get into it.
Sure.
So why don't you tell us about your mom and dad? Like, how did they meet, and how did they come to have a joint wedding with their friends?
Well, they had a joint wedding, but it was with my aunt and uncle. My mother's brother, him and his wife, they both had a double wedding. It was July 9th, 1966.
Wow, that is a unfortunate date.
Yeah, I mean, I stated it in the book. People remember certain dates for certain things.
Yeah.
Other people for certain dates for certain things. So it lends to confusion and misunderstanding a lot of times.
Yeah, sure. Tell us about your dad. What did he do for a living?
He was a mechanical engineer. He was probably the smartest person that I've ever known throughout my life. And I talked about a little bit of it in the book about growing up with an engineer. I mean, it's kind of hard to explain, but a lot of times his thinking and the way that he talked and the way that I talk and my thinking was completely on two different levels. But he was also one to stress education heavily on me. Sometimes I wish I would have listened to him a little bit more.
We all unfortunately think that about our parents, right? How did your dad come to own the property on Signal Mountain?
Well, my mother was raised on the mountain. So, I mean, there was a tie to Signal Mountain all my life. It was where my grandparents lived. He was always one to like privacy. It wasn't to the point of he didn't want anybody around, but he liked his privacy. And he came across it one day. I'm not really positive exactly how he came across the property itself, but he was introduced to Carter Patton, which is the gentleman that owned a whole lot of property and still does up here. This piece of land, it was the only land that was on the other side of Chickamauga Creek. So it wasn't something that they easily were able to get to without going through some really, really rough terrain. I mean, basically you would have to come off of one mountain, go up the mountain and go onto the land because, I mean, it was almost impossible to get there through the woods. And just so it's understood, the Chickamauga Creek was the borderline between not only Carter Patton's property, the Chickamauga Creek formed a big part of the outline of the land.
Okay. How did your dad feel, or you guys as a whole family, about people being on the property and swimming in the blue hole?
Well, it wasn't the fact that he minded people swimming in the blue hole. What the biggest problem was, that land had been abused for a lot of years. People going in, tearing it up, forming all sorts of ruts, mud holes, cutting trees down, and
leaving trash everywhere, partying in the woods, things like that.
When we first started going up there, it was a disaster. I mean,
right.
The amount of trash that was down at the blue hole, there was a little bit of a camping area down there that people used. And I mean, the amount of trash that was down there alone was just...
Right.
In the book, you talked about your relationship with your dad and how he went to college, educated himself, and got an engineering degree, even a couple of patents. You know, just basically got to be the man that he was through hard work and through the love of learning. And you talked about your relationship with your dad and how he was wanting to build his dream home, well, your parents' dream home on the property, and that's why he was limiting the access to the blue hole. And I could totally understand that.
Yeah, he understood completely when he first purchased the property. I mean, he understood that people were going back there to swim. He understood all that, and he continued to let them swim as long as they were respectful to the property. I mean, he never really got upset that people bypassed the no trespassing signs. It was annoying when people saw the no trespassing signs and yet continue. But there were a whole lot of people that would come back there, and a lot of them became friends of ours. But when he would approach them and talk to them and stuff like that, and if they wanted to go to the blue hole, most of the time he allowed them to go to the blue hole. It was kind of an exchange where if he allowed them to continue their trip to the blue hole, that they bring
a bag of trash back. It was your parents' anniversary that weekend, and they were camping on the property. You were a teenager when all this happened, correct?
Yeah, I can walk you through a little bit of a timeline of that day. Basically, they had made plans with my aunt and uncle to go camping on the property and celebrate their anniversary. They usually always celebrated together, whether it was going out to eat or whatever. So Mom and Dad left that afternoon, probably around around 1, 2 o'clock, heading up the mountain. Where we lived at, it took probably about 45 minutes to drive from the house to the start of the logging road that went back to the property. We had a campsite just off of the power line clearing that basically Dad started setting up the camp there, but it was so hot that afternoon, they had decided that they were going to spend the afternoon down at the Blue Hole. For one, there was a whole lot of shade down there, and two, you had the Blue Hole that you could cool off. So my mother walked on down to the Blue Hole, took some of the food and stuff with her, and Dad stayed behind setting the camp up. After he set the camp up, he started walking down, and two men came in. When he heard the vehicle, he thought it was my aunt and uncle, but it was two men. It was Terry Mills and Jeff Mann. They had came in that day, and he turned around and he talked to them, told them that they were trespassing, that they weren't going to be able to use the Blue Hole that day, and warned them that if they did come back, he could get them for trespassing. They left, no big deal. Dad walked on down to the Blue Hole. They spent pretty much the whole day down to the Blue Hole. They started walking up from the Blue Hole back up to the campsite at the power line. It was just after dark. They had our collie dog with him. He had been to the vet before. It would get to the point where he couldn't hold nothing down. Dehydrating, was a concern. Mom spent pretty much the rest of the night trying to make sure the dog was all right. So about just before daybreak the next morning, they both packed up, got in the Jeep, and headed out. They got to Roberts Mill Road, the road that actually goes down the mountain. And my mother realized she had forgot her purse. She had left it at the campsite. They turned around and got to the start of the logging road. Dad got out of the Jeep to where he could walk back to the camp. And Mom turned around and went on to take the dog home. I was at home that morning. Matter of fact, I had a friend that came over, and I woke up. I saw the Jeep pull into the driveway. Mom came in, brought the dog, took care of the dog. She headed back up.
So now this is the next morning. Your parents spent one night out camping, and then the next morning your aunt and uncle would have been meeting them to spend the day with them.
Yes. My aunt and uncle had decided not to go camping. They didn't want to spend the night. They wanted to go eat at a restaurant, whatever. So they were going to go in the next morning on the 10th and meet them and spend the day with them. So yeah, that was the next morning. Mom came in, brought the dog in, and she went back up, and Mom and Dad and my aunt and uncle spent the day doing some hiking, going to the Blue Hole, whatever, sitting around talking. And they left, I think around 2 or 3, I think it was.
And that was on the 10th, right?
Yes. This would be Sunday morning.
So on the 9th, the night that your parents were camping by the Blue Hole, that's when the murders occurred.
Well, now the Blue Hole was there, but now the distance between the Blue Hole and where they were camping, I can't tell you exactly, but I mean, it's a pretty good, you had to walk down into this huge ravine to get down to the Blue Hole. They were camping up by the power lines. And when I say power lines, these are the big, gigantic power poles that goes across the mountain. But yeah, at some point on the night, from reports and trial testimony, supposedly Mason and all of them were eating supper at the house there on Walker Road, and they left out right after supper. What was reported from day one was they were going for a few hours of ATV riding. Not once, not ever was it ever said even in the missing persons report that they were going to the Blue Hole.
Right.
It didn't become going to the Blue Hole until the trial in 98.
10 years after the fact.
Yes.
Everyone finds out these guys are missing the next day.
Well, yeah, here's the thing that a lot of people don't get. It's not because they don't get it. The information on the internet and stuff like that's been so jumbled. When they left the Mason home, They drove out of the driveway, turned left onto Walker Road, went down Walker Road. That road was a dead end, and there was a place what they called Jake's Campground.
Right.
It used to be a campground. It wasn't a campground anymore. A man and a lady owned it. The three men supposedly went down Walker Road, turned on a dirt road or a little dirt trail, went through the dirt trail, got over to Vandergrift Road, and according to Nixon, he found the tracks, followed them across that dirt road, and when they got to Vandergrift Road, if you would have turned left, you would have been going to the entrance of the property, to Dad's property. If you turn right, you can go all the way down to the creek, down into the ravine, across the creek, and back up. Nixon followed the tracks. When they got to Vandergrift Road, they turned left and went down into the ravine, across the creek, up the other side, went into the next county, came back, and went back across the creek and got to Vandergrift Road.
And he was the tracker, the professional tracker.
Yes.
Yeah. I remember reading that in the book and thinking, like, well, he wasn't anywhere near the blue hole. So that threw that theory right out the window.
Well, yeah. And also, when he got to Vandergrift Road, he said it 100 times that when he got to Vandergrift Road, he didn't know where to go. Now, if those guys had intended to go to the blue hole, it would be unreasonable to think they would not have told them where they were going.
Right.
And it doesn't make sense that the ladies, Miss Mason and Paula Griffith, did not tell the police that in the missing persons report that they were going to the blue hole.
Exactly. Right, because then you go right there and look for them.
Yeah. And that's the other kind of odd thing to me. If what they were saying at trial is true, these men were going to the blue hole to go swimming. They said that they got worried later on at night when they didn't come back. I don't get the thought process of laying down, going to sleep. And Paula said that they didn't know where to send anybody, which doesn't make no sense, because if their intention was to go to the blue hole,
then you would send somebody to look for them at the blue hole.
Right, that night. If they did not return on the 9th, by nightfall or just after nightfall, why was nobody ever sent out to the blue hole to try to see if they were broke down, hurt, whatever?
It wasn't the family that was saying that it was their intention to go to the blue hole. Was it the police that were saying it was their intention to go to the blue hole later, 10 years later? Both. Okay.
That's what Paula and all of them testified to at trial was
gotcha.
The intention was going to the blue hole, but it never was reported that way, and it was never in any reports that way until 98 when the trial happened.
We realized they're missing the next day, and then they're not found for a week, right?
Sunday, they realized they were missing. They searched. Monday is when they were, in my opinion, led to the gate area. They found what they said was a crime scene. So Monday, Tuesday, and then Wednesday is when the bodies were located in Marion County.
When the police came and knocked on your door and asked you as a teenager for a rifle, that was before the bodies were found, correct?
Yeah, Dad had went to it was a little one-room schoolhouse, brick one-room schoolhouse. The building was there, and they were just using the building as quote-unquote a command post. Dad got a call Monday at work to come to the command post, and he went there after work. But as I said, Dad was an engineer. He designed machines for different companies, and he had a meeting scheduled before all this happened to meet with Randy Nunley after work over where Randy worked.
Right.
After Dad left work, he went over there to meet Randy Nunley. He wasn't there. He went to Randy Nunley's house, which is up on Signal Mountain, and they got to talking. They got in Randy Nunley's vehicle. Randy brought him over to the command post, and Dad talked to the detectives there. Dad offered to let them go look at the Jeep. They asked about the shotgun. He was like, yeah. According to Parham, they wanted to test it to see if it had been fired. After the interview, they had went over to Randy Nunley's house in one of the detectives' cars, and the detectives looked in the Jeep. There was a .22 pistol in the Jeep. They pick it up, smell it, put it back down. Nothing to worry about there. They find the logbook in the Jeep. Dad gave them the logbook that day. I don't remember exactly what time it was, but I was at home by myself, and Detective Sneed came to the door with somebody else. I don't know who it was, but he said something of, your dad said we could pick up the shotgun. As I said in the book, I'd always been taught to be respectful of law enforcement. So when he asked me for the shotgun, I went and got it and gave it to him.
Right.
Didn't think nothing about it.
Right. All before the bodies were even found. So at this point, we don't even know that there's been a murder.
Well, now they know something is wrong because they found the ATVs on Roberts Mill Road Sunday night.
Okay, so they found the bikes right away.
Sunday, they found the bikes in an illegal dump site.
Right.
Off of Roberts Mill Road. And then there was two of them that had blood on them. One of them was clean, didn't have any blood on them, according to what was testified to. Monday, they came to the gate. Tuesday and then Wednesday is when they got the call that the bodies had been found. So, yeah, they picked up the shotgun right away. They didn't pick up any other gun except that shotgun 2 days before they even knew if the guys were dead or alive.
Why did they focus on your dad only?
Even before the bodies were found.
I heard y'all talking about, how or why. I wish I knew. Now, I can give you an idea of what I think, and this is only what I think. It's not provable. And it's one or two things that I think it was. Dad and Mom, after they cooperated from top to bottom with them, they went down, turned over the Jeep to be sent to Nashville or Knoxville or wherever it was to be tested. I mean, they cooperated from the very start. They said they were on the property, and whether it was a easy target because Dad said he was, at the campsite, or the other thought process in my mind is, to me, more realistic, but I don't know it for sure. Carter Patton, and I talked about it in the book, their family was a prominent, wealthy family. Dad liked Carter Patton. He really liked him. I met him, I think, once out there but Carter Patton had a caretaker, Cecil Hickman. He would pull guns on people, run them off, threaten them. Matter of fact, he got taken to court one time by one of the people that he confronted. I don't know what happened at the court case, but I do know it was taken to court. And in fact, he had a run-in with Mason and Nixon just about 2 months before the murders.
And that was two of the guys that were killed that night.
That were killed.
It was just Mason.
Nixon was the neighbor who went and looked for their bodies.
Yes, he was the one that followed that path that I told you, going across and going over into the other county and back.
Right. Yeah, so that was like one of the things that Nitty and I really went back and forth about in the first episode, as to we didn't understand, Cecil Hickman, or even after listening to your book, Joe Skinner, why your dad was so focused in on so hard when there seemed to be other.
Well, I can't answer.
Right, of course.
I can't really answer that. Now I do. When he turned the logbook over to Perham that day, the 11th, on Monday.
And when you say logbook, you're referring to the list of people that had been on the property.
That Dad kept a log of people that, he would meet on the property. And basically all it was, it wasn't it was a
list that the police told him to keep for people that were coming on the property.
It had been recommended to him that he keep that information, because if they kept coming back, then he could use that information to charge them with trespassing.
Right. And then they eventually used that logbook against him.
Yeah. Basically what they did is they went through the logbook a little by little and found people to go against him, say something bad about Dad.
Right.
And I showed in the book how statements changed from, the day they gave them in 88 to, when they testified. It's so easily seen that they were whether it was them changing it just because the detectives were pushing them that way. The detectives would interview people and Dad's name would never come up. And then all of a sudden, one of the detectives say, well, have you seen Frank Casteel, and show a picture of Dad? Have you seen his Jeep? Basically they're just feeding them information.
Right. They're leading them down the road that they want.
Right. At trial, out of the 30 or 40 people trespassing, it was only like 6 or 7 incidents because Terry Mills and Jeff Mann were together. There were other people that testified. You only
would come down in groups of people. So really it would be 5 or 6 incidents, but there would be 3 or 4 people there at a time. It
was 12 people or whatever, but you break that up, it's technically only like 4 or 5 encounters.
Right.
That really occurred. They were searching. I mean, they used that logbook to search out people. If the person that they were interviewing said anything about Hickman, they'd let it go only so far, and then they would cut it off. If they were saying something nice about Dad, they would cut it off. I mean, unless they were talking about Dad, it didn't matter. They didn't want to hear it.
And Cecil Hickman looked good for it because his alibi was a lie. He bragged about it at the bar when he was drunk. And he had shot over people's heads before. And he also had a problem with Mr. Mason, didn't he?
Well, yeah. Now, I don't know. I know what you're referring to about the drunk guy, but I'm not really positive who that was. So I can't say that was Hickman. But there was an interview with a guy that talked about a guy walking up at a flea market and bragging that they'd made it to the big time because they had been on Unsolved Mysteries. Right. Now I don't know if that was Cecil Hickman or not. But what I can tell you about Cecil Hickman, I don't know if he had anything to do with it or not. But his alibi, it falls apart. It wasn't worth nothing. He was saying that he was in Kentucky at a tractor pull. That tractor pull never existed. Right. That day and that week. That tractor pull didn't start until almost a week and a half later. The detectives ignored it and lied about it because Sneed said, well, I verified it with a ticket and billboard. That was a lie. I mean, it was a plain old out lie.
What about Joe Skinner?
Now, Joe Skinner was a big roughneck. I talked about him a little bit in the book, and matter of fact, he was on Unsolved Mystery. He's the one talking to Parham and talking about shots being heard. Now, the biggest thing about Joe Skinner that in my mind is questionable. When he was interviewed, he was at a house on Hickson Springs Road, and they supposedly hear shots that night, and he pinpoints it to literally, the shots came from the gate or this little concrete area 5 feet north of the gate or something like that. I don't remember exactly how he stated it. And there's just no way you can do that. I mean, there's no way that somebody can pinpoint shots that accurately, right, especially in an area like this where you got valleys, you got echoes. It's just impossible.
Didn't somebody in the witness stand or while they were being questioned claim that they saw Joe Skinner's pickup truck with the 3 ATVs on the back of it?
Yeah, there was one interview where a guy had stated that he was going down Roberts Mill Road. He passed the people dumping the ATVs out, and one of them he identified as Joe Skinner. I don't know. I mean, I do know that man was just a mean roughneck that didn't care about other people's property. So you got these people that there's little things that could lead them towards them, whether or not it turned out to be it was them or not. There was a lot of little things that should have caused them to be investigated, and they just never were investigated.
That was wild that they never investigated so many leads that could have been plausible, because when you go over the different witness accounts and everything, none of that
that comes into play until 10 years later after they aired the episode of Unsolved Mysteries. And the fact that they used an actor that resembled your dad, I thought that was just a smack in the face.
Yeah, now the interviews for a lot of these people came throughout the years, all the way up until, I don't know, probably 95, 96. I don't know exactly. They were interviewing people throughout the years. The Unsolved Mysteries, from my understanding, and this is only through my understanding and what Sneed has testified to, what he has said, which that man is a liar from top to bottom. But after the Unsolved Mysteries, a man and a woman came forward about supposedly being the people that were on Roberts Mill Road blocking traffic that night. That in itself is really interesting because the guy was allegedly trying to recover his dune buggy from out of the woods, right up from where the illegal dump site where the ATVs were. Just right up from there was a dirt trail. If you were coming down Roberts Mill Road, it would be going up in the woods to your right. He was up there trying to retrieve his dune buggy, and in his interview he is telling them, what occurred, and he talks about an ATV coming flying down the trail towards his way, and the detectives didn't ask him one question about this ATV that this guy seen. I mean, you would think with this case they'd be like, well, what color was that ATV, or try to figure out if it was one of the ATVs. And not only that, just up from there that night, quote unquote drug party was taking place at a place where that trail leads to is called Eagle's Nest, and there was a drug party that night. Now, what a drug party is, I can guess, but I don't have a clue what that would be. But anyway, the detectives found out there was a drug party. That leads to 100 questions. Who was at that party?
Right, exactly.
How did they find out about it? Who told them about it?
Right.
Was this drug related? Was Mason and Griffith and Smock, were they over in that area? I don't know. The quote-unquote crime scene at the gate makes no sense because you've got 3 men that are killed. You've got 2 guys. One of them is shot in the chest. Mason was shot in the chest. Smock was shot once in his right shoulder. He was shot again, I think it was his left side. Anyway, that shot travels upward from down at his side and traveling upward. The Unsolved Mysteries puts it as he got off the ATV and ran. That was why the rapid fire was questionable, because if, like the state said, it was rapid fire doesn't match with somebody having to go chase somebody to finish them off. So you got 2 guys that were killed. The guy supposedly jumps off his ATV. The rapid fire doesn't make sense in that scenario.
Right.
And what I'm trying to get at is at the gate, there were, I think it was 3 or 4 areas of blood. Now, here's the thing that just blows my mind. You got the 2 men that were shot with a shotgun, and then you have a guy have his basically half of his head blown away. The only blood that they find is in a pool in the middle of the gate. They find one over on one side of the gate, over into the woods. And then they find 2 areas on the other side of the gate. And it's all pools of blood here, and here. The drag marks that they talked about going through the woods, they say that there was no blood in those drag marks. So it makes no sense. A guy's head is blown away and he's dragged over into the woods.
There should have been blood everywhere.
There should have been blood everywhere. And matter of fact, private detective that was hired before the second trial, he was like, it makes no sense. There wasn't enough blood and there wasn't enough chaos in that area.
Right.
I don't know. I mean, did somebody haul the bodies over there and dump them over there for a little while they, hauled something,
right,
done other things? I don't know.
Yeah, so let's talk about the crimes a little bit. You mentioned in your book that there was a cadaver dog. They brought blood with them. Could you explain that a little bit for me?
Yeah. And I think that's where the pool of blood in the middle of the gate came from, but I can't prove it.
Right.
Of course. The search was nothing but a circus. You had people trampling
through areas. Matter of fact, there were two guys, Donnie Harris and Eddie Brown, that in their interviews, they talk about finding blood at the gate area, but finding it as they were walking through the area. So they basically, one of them actually stepped in it and found it. They talk about in their interview also about hauling people in and out of the area, hauling people back to the power lines. So, I mean, there was just, it was like a Easter egg hunt or something. People were just walking around picking stuff up.
Yeah. What about didn't somebody take evidence home, a rain jacket or something?
Yeah. Now that was taken from the ATVs. When the guy originally found them, he went down there, done whatever, came back up, told the guy that was coming up the mountain. When the cop got there, I mean, there were like 6, 7 people down at the ATVs just wandering around, and one of them supposedly took a bag with a raincoat in it.
That's
Never to be recovered. Don't know, where it's at, what happened to it, where'd it go, who knows. They never pursue that. We have no paperwork at all to show any kind of investigation of where that would have went to.
Yeah, I mean, the way that you describe in your book the way Sneed and the rest of the detectives handle evidence, mishandle evidence, keep records of evidence, store evidence, all of that seems totally wild to me.
A lot of people don't realize that DNA was very prevalent even back in 88. I mean, it wasn't like it was completely unknown. When all this blood and stuff that was tested or whatever, they destroyed every bit of it. 4 or 5 bags, and I'm pulling this out of the top of my head.
Right.
It's like 3 or 4 bags of dirt and debris. And that's one thing that was one reason I contacted y'all. A lot of people say it, even the detectives say it, and it's not true. And that's the fact that they say brain tissue was found at the gate area. The problem is you can say that, but when they sent the 4 bags of dirt and blood and whatever else, the TBI sent 4 bags. They test 1 bag by putting a cotton swab in it, test what's on the cotton swab, and then the rest of it's just destroyed, probably sent to a incinerator and destroyed.
Why do you think evidence was mishandled in such a way? I mean, I know it was 89. It's really poorly done. Like, what is your opinion on that?
There again, I don't know for sure, but personally I feel like that they were covering for somebody. Whether it be another caretaker, whether it be somebody else, I don't know.
Right.
But in my opinion, or in my thoughts, and I can't prove it, of course. I mean, this is just my opinion. I think they were covering for somebody.
Wow.
Whether it was Hickman, I don't know. I don't know if the man had anything to do with it or not. All I was really saying in the book is, look, you've got somebody that lied about their alibi. I mean, the investigation into Cecil Hickman was pretty much non-existent.
Right. Right. You would think in a murder trial, in a murder investigation, you would check every single possible suspect there could be thoroughly.
Personally, I think by the end of the day on the 10th or middle of the day, Monday, I think they had decided who they wanted. And a lot of that was people coming and saying, this new guy's waving shotguns around. I mean, saying all sorts of saying all this stuff. And it was because a lot of these people, people ask, well, why would these people lie? Well, Dad had taken away their dope smoking, pot smoking, beer drinking, dumpster play area. They wanted it back. I think that's the explanation for a lot of these people lying.
Also, there was a political race going on, right?
When the crime occurred, there wasn't really a race going on, but shortly after that, there was a race started throughout the years. I mean, when it came to the sheriff's office or the sheriff's race or the DA's race or whatever, this case always came up in some form or fashion.
Between the murders and your dad actually being arrested and charged, your family was harassed pretty heavily by the local people. There was a petition, you said in your book, for your family to leave and that they were undesirable. Your dad was constantly getting harassing letters and such.
Now, the petition, it was sent out. I mean, I think the date on the petition is like July 19th or something like that. But anyway, I mean, it wasn't that long when they sent that petition out. So I mean, it was just days after, things occurred. These people had made up their mind.
Yeah,
early
why?
On.
That makes no sense.
I would love to know the answer to that myself, because it doesn't make no sense. The only explanations that I can think of is the ones that I've talked about.
Right. Yeah.
Him taking away their party area.
They were trespassing on property, so like they have to sort of like admit that they had done something wrong if they were going to say that they were on private property.
And the funny part to me is all these people that came forward later on saying that, he threatened them with a shotgun and pointed a shotgun at them, threatened to kill them, all this stuff. But yet not over all that time, the month or two he was up there, or 2 or 3 months, whatever it was. And all these people that he made contact with that was in the logbook, not a single person ever brought charges against him. Nobody went to there wasn't a report made, this man, said he was going to start killing people. To me, it just seems like it would be a normal reaction to a normal person. I was back here in the middle of nowhere, and this guy comes up with a shotgun, points it at me, threatens me, and says he's going to start shooting people.
Right. Why would you report that to the police?
Why would you not go to the police right after that and report it?
Right. Now, did I hear in your book that your dad didn't even own a shotgun before the murders?
He didn't own it right away. I mentioned it in the book, but I forget the date. That shotgun was a gift given to him a little later. Some of these people that testified at trial lied about the shotgun, because at that time he didn't have it.
So really, like, them saying that he held a shotgun before the murder or whatever, like, that's really just like, there's no evidence of that either. It's just like hearsay at this point, right?
It's not against the law. And matter of fact, Dad, first or second time he went up there, Mom and Dad, and I talk about this in the book, he was confronted by a person with a gun pointed at him, when he first went up there, just to scope out the property.
Right. I remember you saying that in the beginning of the book, like there was a mentally unstable person that was there.
And I mean, a few months later, whenever it was, he ended up barricading himself in his place of business with 1,000 rounds of ammunition and having a standoff with the police.
With someone like him, someone like Hickman, someone like Skinner, like there's many other like options of potential people,
And what I was getting at is, he may have had it's not against the law for somebody to walk up, be on their own property. Dad was on his own property. It's not against the law for somebody to walk up with a shotgun in his hand. If he had a gun in his hand, if he just had it hanging down, or if he had it leaning over his shoulder, I mean, it's not against the law. I mean, it might intimidate people.
He was well within his rights to protect his property. From the initial questioning of the witnesses, they all stated that he hadn't pointed the gun at them, that he was holding it safely down at his side. They didn't report it to the police. They weren't threatened to the point where they wanted to report it to the police. It wasn't until 10 years later that all of a sudden everybody came forward and said, oh yeah, I felt threatened. I felt scared. And that was just unfortunate coincidence.
And I think a lot of that came through quite a few years of the detectives slowly brainwashing some people.
Yeah, feeding them evidence and things to say.
In my mind, the biggest example of what you're talking about is Jeff Mann. In his very first statement, he was with Terry Mills out there on the 9th. In his first statement, he says 4 times that he did not point the gun. He did not point it at Terry. He didn't point it. I mean, he said it 4 or 5 times. And then it all of a sudden, the next few, you can almost see it progressively getting worse every time. Every time they'd interview him, it was progressively changing over a period of time. Why they did that, why Jeff Mann did that, I don't know. Personally, I think it's because he was related to him, but that's my opinion. He was related to Mason.
Oh. In all of this, everybody years later that testified against your father, they all gained financially, didn't they?
Not all of them gained financially, but now a lot of people did. People building their political careers.
Right.
Sneed tried to build his political career, but he's fell by the wayside a long time ago. And I know we hadn't talked about Hill. I mean, even she gained financially.
Janice Hill was the one that
Marie Hill.
Oh, Marie.
Was it Marie Hill? Yeah, it's
Yes, Marie Hill.
So let's talk about her for a minute. She is the one that worked with police to set your dad up with audio recordings, and I mean, she was like almost like a spy for the police, correct?
Yeah, Dad and her had known each other since junior high, and there was a class reunion that they both attended, and at some point, Dad lost his mind, started having an affair with her,
right?
And personally, I think she was a plant, but I can't prove that, of course. But at some point, she supposedly starts working with the sheriff's office or whatever she was. They're trying to get her to, get certain things from Dad. They're recording pretty much everything from bedroom talk to everything. They're trying to get something said, and it all accumulates with when my mother goes to her house and confronts Dad about where her marriage was at. I mean, she wanted to know where her marriage was at. I mean, if it was completely over or what was going on.
Right. So your dad is at Marie's house and your mom shows up there to be like, what the hell? Like, let's have a talk about this.
Yeah.
Right. Which, just so you know, I don't blame her. I would have done the same thing. So
at some point before that or around that time, there were some things that were mailed that my mother states that she sent, basically saying that Dad was the one that killed the 3 men.
She was trying to scare her off.
Yeah, I don't know how many people have ever heard that saying. It's definitely true in a lot of ways. Hell have no fury like a woman scorned.
You got that right.
I mean, it was something that she had against him. He was making her life miserable. Why does he deserve to be happy? Right. It's that kind of thing. Skipping ahead to the trial, they took these letters and supposedly took DNA from the stamp. They say that it proved. I mean, they said that the DNA proved that it was Mom that wrote them. Now, she said she wrote them. I'm not saying she didn't, but What I'm saying, what I'm getting at is they talked a lot about the DNA of how it solved, got it solved, this, that, and the other. That DNA didn't prove nothing. It was a 1 in 10,000 other people that could have left that DNA. I mean, you would think DNA would be. It was her, it was Miss Casteel that wrote these letters. Well, that's not the case. The DNA didn't prove nothing.
But what does that matter? Even if she did write the letters or didn't, it's not any real evidence. It's just her saying.
Well, that's. I mean, to me, that's. I could write. I could write 1,000 different things about people, but it doesn't make it true.
Right, exactly.
And what the prosecution did was they claimed that Dad had burned one of the letters. Well, it just happened to be the one letter that they say was the most damning letter.
Right.
The judge allows Marie Hill to testify to what was in that letter. Well,
That's crazy.
she could say anything was in that letter. We don't know. There's no proof of what was in that letter.
Right. It's irrelevant. It really is irrelevant.
Yeah, I mean, they had a open slate right there of what they could say that it stated. I mean, you could say anything. It could have said that she had something to do with the JFK conspiracy or something. I mean,
right.
Anything could be said, but it doesn't make it true.
Now, why didn't his lawyers object to this evidence? Like, why did that?
Well, I mean, they did. I mean, they did object to a lot of these people, but I mean, the judge allowed the first judge at the first trial allowed all of it. He allowed all the tape, the 3 hours in. I mean, there was objections. It's just they were ignored by the judge. Right. Now, there were some things that I think that the lawyers could have done better, but I mean, what can you do?
So let me just run through quickly, and you can discuss after what your opinion is, but just some of the evidence. So the gunshot wounds, the medical examiner said that it would have been inconclusive that any ballistics would have matched to a gun potentially that your father would have shot.
Well, no. Hang. Let me say something real.
Yeah, go for it.
The medical examiner, he was a medical examiner. He was not a forensics expert. In fact, he did not do any testing of anything, blood, any kind of samples. He didn't do any testing. All he did was give his opinion. They would take something to him and he would give his opinion, and he would say, well, you send it to the TBI or, whatever. So, I mean, he didn't test nothing.
Okay. So we don't have any evidence there, like ballistics wise or whatever.
Linking to Frank Casteel.
Right. So then let's talk about for a second the ATVs. This was like a huge part in your book about how your dad, who as a younger man was very active, but at some point had hurt his back pretty severely from what I understand. This is probably the most shocking thing to me in the book, that the prosecution based this whole thing about how the ATVs were put on the back of the Jeep, how they would have fit on the Jeep and how they would have done it, but they really never proved it. And then at the end, I believe it was Sneed maybe, or the prosecutor himself, who was like, well, I don't know how he did it, but I know he did it.
The prosecution changed their story throughout. I mean, like Mildred Hines, her testimony didn't go the way they wanted it to. So by the end, when they did their closing argument, they pretty much just threw her testimony out. She was put in to try to make it sound like that he was hauling all these ATVs out on the back of the Jeep, but she just proved the opposite. I mean, she just testified to the opposite, and it didn't go the way that the prosecution wanted. Matter of fact, she helped the defense more than she did the prosecution, and they just threw it out at the end. I mean, they can just willy-nilly throw anything in and out. And they did it all the way through both trials.
Yeah, that's what shocked me the most. The fact that they were allowing so many things to just go unchecked. And during the closing arguments, the prosecution made a claim of more information, and that was used in the appeal as a cause for approving the appeal, wasn't it? In the closing statement, he made a comment. I wrote it down.
Yeah, he said something like
about the winch not being connected to the Jeep.
He made this absurd suggestion that it was being talked about, about how heavy the ATVs were. how hard it would be to load and unload the ATVs, which were anywhere from 200 to 300 pounds a piece. There was a winch on the front of the Jeep. So the DA decides that he's like, well, it wouldn't have been that difficult to lift them because he had a winch on the front of the Jeep. Well, yeah, he had a winch on the front of the Jeep, but you're talking about trying to put something in the back of the same Jeep. How in the world are you going to do that?
Right.
It would take an elaborate setup to get that done.
Exactly.
And I mean, it was absurd.
Right. I think the whole trial, the whole case against your father, I think it was absurd.
I don't understand. I'll never understand till my dying day how prosecutors. I know that this ain't the only prosecutor that's ever been able to do this kind of stuff. Where throughout the trial they would have Snead testify to something, and they talked about an embankment. Snead testified that there was like an embankment that he could have backed up to use as a loading dock. Well, for one, there wasn't an embankment that tall in that area, and two, it would have been impossible. It still would require lifting the ATVs because the tailgate was too narrow to be able to roll in there. And I sent y'all a picture earlier with a picture of the ATV where they had crammed it into the back.
When I saw pictures of that put things even into more perspective. They were squeezed in there.
And the thing is, if you look at that picture, it totally eliminates any idea that he could have backed up to a bank, any kind of embankment. Because the ATV, you can see the front wheel is sitting on the open tailgate, and then you've got a spare tire holder that swings outward. So it's just freely sitting there. And plus, not only that, the spare tire is lower than the tailgate.
Yeah, it would have been impossible. It would have been impossible to drive that.
It would have been impossible to do that. But see, they were able to say things like, there was a flattened area or there was this or whatever. There were, one of the big lies was Hickman. They had tickets verifying the tractor pull. Well, they'd say that in court. Dad's attorney would say, well, if you can give that to us. They never turn it over because it doesn't exist. The defense attorneys never push them to produce the proof of what they said. They just spoke non-existent evidence into evidence.
Is there any other evidence you wanted to cover that you thought was mishandled?
Back where the bodies were found, there was a high-powered bullet casing found. They at least took a picture of it at the time. And Kenneth Griffith's autopsy, the medical examiner stated in his autopsy that it is highly likely that it was a high-powered rifle or a handgun that killed him. But trial, he tries to change that. He tries to make excuses, but there's nothing showing what that was. You've got a high-powered rifle bullet casing at the scene where they're dumped at. Well, you got to wonder if possibly if that was something to do with it.
It points to possibly a different killer or multiple killers.
And the prosecution started saying that even the TV shows and stuff like that, they talk about all of them were shot with a shotgun. Well, we don't know that for a fact because we don't know what caused the injury to Kenneth Griffith. The autopsy report says that it could have been a shotgun slug. And I know y'all talked about different types of ammunition, but you got basically three types of ammunition. You've got birdshot, which are tiny little pellets.
Right.
You've got buckshot, which is bigger than a BB.
Okay.
And then you got a slug, which is basically almost like what they would have used like in the Civil War. Looked like something
big,
similar to that,
bullet.
like a slug. But if you look at the size of the wound on the autopsy, it's too small for a slug to have been used. So I don't think a slug could have done it.
Yeah, I remember that we were going back and forth about the bird shot and the buckshot, and that was like a source of us sort of bickering back and forth about the type of weapon that was used. But yeah, there was no really conclusive weapon, and definitely none that said that was your
the
dad.
other big thing that I know y'all talked a little bit about, there were 5 or 6 casings found at the gate area, and they were collected. Well, they sent them all to the TBI. The TBI determines that 3 of them were all shot in the same shotgun, but it was not shot in Casteel's shotgun. And then the other 3, they say, were too damaged to make a conclusion. Well, it's awful coincidental. You got 3 shotgun shells, and that's the same number of known shotgun wounds. And the other thing I was wanting to clear up of what y'all were talking about, those 3 types of ammunition can be loaded into the same shotgun.
Oh, okay. That's interesting.
And that's what the prosecution was saying, is that he meticulously loaded 3 different types of ammunition or whatever. They wanted to make it one shooter, and they wanted to make it him. I'm trying to not jumble this, but there's a few things that I think undoubtedly shows that he was innocent. For one, he traveled up and down Roberts Mill Road anywhere from 5 to 6 times that day, where they say he had just recently dumped 3 ATVs. So it makes no sense. I mean, like I said in the book, it's like going and robbing a bank and coming back an hour later, making a deposit at the same bank, and then giving the teller the ride home.
Right.
It's absurd.
Because the thing we do know is that your dad took your sister and a friend to swim later. So,
Right.
Doesn't, how could all be true at the same time?
On top of that, on the way back home that night, what does he do? He stops, sees 4 or 5 men,
right,
with a broke down truck, and Lee Griffith is the one that comes up and asks him for a ride up to Walker Road.
Right. And this is the brother of one of the victims.
Yeah. Lee Griffith is the brother of Kenneth Griffith. That makes no sense. It's definitely not the sign of a guilty man. I mean, it's just not the sign of a guilty person to do something like that.
Right.
And allowing the detectives the day after to go look over the Jeep, and the detectives say that, they were all shot with a shotgun. Well, that's not true. They didn't believe that from day one, because both search warrants for the home and the land both stated that they were looking for a rifle owned by Casteel that possibly was used in the murders. They didn't know from day one what Griffith was shot with. They were taking the medical examiner's word that he was highly likely he was shot with a high-powered rifle or handgun.
Right, which are all vastly different types of guns.
Yeah. One thing I want to say here is it really doesn't matter to me whether or not people think that he did it. If you think in your mind that he's the one that did it, okay, there's nothing that I can say that's ever going to change that person's mind. But what irritates me the most is the complete misinformation that's got out there. And it's not talking about y'all. Like I said in the beginning, I understand why people get it wrong because of what's out there.
For me, when I do research for a case, I go to Google, right? I get on the internet, I look up websites, I look up news articles, I watch what the news says. So that was one of the things that was really eye-opening for me in this whole process, was that I'm using media information to, just regurgitate the same information that's out there. And Nydia, took her source from your book and from a totally different source than me. And it was really shocking.
I've got to say, I mean, God bless her. She was really, really trying.
She was.
I mean, she was really trying, and I mean, she got some things wrong, but I don't judge her for that. I don't blame her for that. I mean, it's a lot of information to take in. I mean, it's a whole lot of information to take in. I can't say I know everything about the case, but I know a whole lot more than most people know about the case.
Of course.
And I said it in the book. I mean, and there are people out there that are like this, that, they'll sit there and watch, a show like Bloodlands and take it for the gospel truth.
Right.
And it was nothing but mostly fairy tale information.
Yeah, it's a dramatization of like someone's opinion without using the facts is kind of wild.
And y'all talked about the order of them being shot, because Unsolved Mysteries, Sneed said something about that. Griffith was the first one that was shot. There's nothing in the gunshot wounds, nothing there that shows what occurred at the time. There's nothing that proves that. I mean, just because you think that doesn't mean it's true. I mean, it's called a theory for a reason. I mean, yeah, it's a theory. It doesn't make it gospel.
So your dad gets convicted, and then he has an appeal. So there's a second trial, and the second trial he gets a different lawyer, but still not really effective, and he's convicted a second time.
Yes.
And then he makes his own after appeals process.
Yeah, he does what is called a post conviction. It's not necessarily a trial, but it's it's more of an appeal than it is a trial.
Right. So in listening to that part of your book, I was sort of rooting for, this new attorney that you had come in, and it sounded like she was going to try to do something. And it really just felt like, for me, as like now someone who's read the book, listened to the book, that he really just like did not get a fair shake.
Well, yeah. And I personally think, and it's nothing against that lawyer. They buried her because she dared to question the God of prosecutors, right. Bill Cox. They buried her because she was only doing what she was supposed to do. It's like, how dare you accuse me, Lord Almighty, of prosecutional misconduct. I don't know for a fact, but she's no longer practicing law here in Chattanooga. I think they ran her out of town.
Really?
I mean that's just my opinion, but and she was a small time lawyer. She was a good lawyer, I think. There was tension between her and Dad. And matter of fact, I had a drag out, knockdown argument over the phone with her one day about something. I don't hold that against her. It's just we disagreed, and Dad disagreed with her about certain things. And like I said in the book, Dad left his fate to the attorneys before.
Right.
He wasn't going to do that again.
Yeah, and you would think with a trial like that, the person who's on trial should have final say about how their trial is being handled. And that doesn't sound like that was the case with your dad.
Like I said in the book, one thing I learned a long time ago is lawyers don't like to be questioned about their strategy.
Okay.
And also, an out-of-town lawyer, I think, would have been better. Because
yeah, I think so too.
They argued, some of them more than the other, but they just wasn't going to buck the system. They got to work with these people every day. They're not going to buck the system like a well-paid out-of-town lawyer would have.
Right.
It's just like the picture from the basement of the house where the tarp was laying on the shelf. Whoever was there that day, the lawyer was there, and he saw that. Because, he was truly excited about what he had found, they got rid of the picture. And luckily, there was one picture that you could tell that it was a tarp. But, Snead got on the stand and he swears that this burnt piece of plastic was a tarp, but he couldn't look at a color photo and see that there was a tarp laying there on the shelf. Now, and a lot of people say that, there could have been more than one tarp. Well, of course. But if they were really concerned about a tarp being used at that moment, because Snead said that stuff was collected on the 11th, which was a lie, they would have collected that tarp also. One thing that I think proves a tarp that was burnt that they showed in a picture was fabricated.
Really?
The lab report on the blue substance that was collected out of the fire pit said that there was not enough to really get a definitive answer. The lab couldn't say it was a tarp. They couldn't say what it was, and it was a small sample. The picture that they showed in court was a pretty large sample of burnt plastic. But also there's a report that I don't think they meant to give to us, and that's a report that says it was either Snead or Gaskell collecting it from the evidence room. There was a report saying that there was a native woods from the area up there, charcoal, and a tarp label. I think that shows that they had fabricated that evidence, because if they had a label from the fire pit showing that it was a tarp, they would have used it in court.
Right, because that at least would have been some sort of solid evidence, which there really doesn't seem like there was. Right. There was a ton. I said to you on the phone, and we said it at the end of the last episode, and you've even said it here, it doesn't matter if you think he was guilty or not. The fact still remains that he didn't really get a fair trial, and that there's really no hard evidence saying that he did do it.
Everything pointed away from him.
Right.
I mean, the shotgun didn't. I mean, it was not matched to the shells found at the gate area. His Jeep was thoroughly tested by the TBI. No blood was found at all. They talk about John Lyons. He's a obsessive liar. He was trying to indicate that it was my mother washing the back of the Jeep out. The story was so absurd anyway, because that car wash that he said that he saw her at, or saw the Jeep being washed out, is right there on the main highway going across the mountain. Somebody's going to wash something like that out in the middle in broad daylight.
Right.
Right on the main thoroughfare. It was absurd.
Well, not only that, but he was wrong about the location of the Jeep and what day it was where. I mean, everybody that they would bring on to talk about, who saw the truck here, or who was driving this truck, or what color was the truck, what color was the Jeep, they all contradicted each other. And that was part of what was so confusing to me. And a lot of the state's witnesses actually proved what Dad had said early on. Right.
Janice Hall proved that it was true that they were taking the dog home that morning. She saw the Jeep going by with a woman driver,
right,
and a collie dog in the back. And that a dog is not going to go in the back of a Jeep that would have had blood when John Lyons said that she was seen washing the blood out. It's little things like that. You almost have to read the book to put it together. It's hard.
No, you definitely should read the book. I think, Nydia really, at the end of the last episode, I was like, I don't know how I feel, whatever, we're not going to take a side. But she really did poke a lot of holes in the evidence that I was presenting. And reading the book, I mean, and even the guy who does the Audible, who I think did a really great job, says in the beginning of the book that he was going to read the book with an open mind. And And by the end of the book, he really was convinced that there was no.
Yeah, actually, that's the editor. That's what.
Oh, the editor. Okay.
Yeah, the editor is the one that said that. I've got to say this: the editor that I hired to edit the book, he went above and beyond to help get that done, because I mean, a lot of people may not realize it or not, but even self-publishing a book is a very, very, very expensive undertaking. You're talking thousands and thousands of dollars. I'll never probably recoup the money that because I don't get a lot of money out of book sales. I mean, it's just not a lucrative, it's not like a lucrative deal where you're getting $8-9 a book or something like that. I mean, it's pennies on the dollars is what I get out of book sales.
Right. But that wasn't really the point of you writing this book.
No, the reason I wrote the book is because I wanted something that told the truth and was more than, a bunch of fairy tale docudramas and news footage. And on top of the news footage, the total misinformation that's out there on the internet now. Everything from Wikipedia to, other people that's got little crime blogs or whatever that's written about this case, it's just an extensive amount of misinformation.
At the very end of the book, we learn that your dad ends up dying in prison.
He passed away in prison. We knew it was coming for a while. I mean, it wasn't it wasn't all of a sudden. He had made the best of a really, really bad situation.
Yeah.
The day he was arrested, I mean, it definitely changed my life. And it changed my whole family's life, because we saw, what I call the dark side of the justice system. And y'all stated it in either the first podcast or the one after that y'all talk a little bit about me contacting y'all. I mean, it happens, and that's what I can't get about some people. They're just dead set that, yeah, he's guilty. I saw Unsolved Mysteries, or I saw Bloodlands. That redneck, it's just people believe in that stuff. And I mean, like I said, DNA has taken hundreds and thousands of people and freedom for crimes that they didn't commit.
Yeah.
And y'all said it one time before, if there had been DNA or blood or whatever saved, it very well could have proven for or against him committing the crime.
Because the fact of the matter is, if he did not do it, the family did not receive the justice that they deserve, because that means someone else got away with murder.
And I think that's the reason they never, ever, even though Perron sat there and told him they wanted to take the gun and test it to see if it had been fired. They never tested it to see if it was fired, see if it had been fired. They didn't want to. Or if they did, they found out it wasn't the gun, and they've hidden it away. I don't know if, either way, they didn't want that answer, because, it would have blown the idea that they were...
Right, if they were so hell-bent on it being your dad. Do you have an opinion on who you think?
Who did it?
Yeah.
No, I really don't. And like I said, I mean, even in the book, I said it. I don't know if Hickman had anything to do with it or not. I don't know. I mean, I do know that his alibi was crap.
Right.
I do know it was a lie. The detectives went along with it, with that lie. I don't know if he had anything to do with it. I don't know if Joe Skinner had anything to do with it. But in this justice system, you've got to be proven beyond a reasonable doubt.
Right.
And I describe reasonable doubt as if you have a box and you put a cat and a mouse in a box,
Yeah, that was a very good description.
And you seal that box up and you open it up, a day later and the mouse is gone, you pretty much know what happened. But you do the same thing, put the cat in the box and a mouse in the box. You open it up the day later and the mouse is gone. But yet you see a small little hole just big enough for that mouse to get out. That's reasonable doubt.
You got it.
Yeah.
Just to close it up here, how is your family? Is your mom still with us?
Yes, yeah. And she's doing well. I live 3 minutes away from where she lives at. She's doing well. We're doing well. I mean, it was a long journey because, we spent a lot of money over the years. Mom spent a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of miles, going to see him, because, it's not like he was in prison right down the road. He was in prison halfway across the state or all the way across the state. There were times when, it would be a 6-hour drive one way just to go see him for a couple hours.
Yeah.
So, and not to mention the cost of the prison phone calls. It was just a racket. But no, like I said, we're all fine. Like I said, I live 3 or 4 minutes away from where she lives at.
That's great.
We continued to live normally like we've always, even from day one. It definitely interfered with a lot of things, but you just got to take the punches and roll with the punches, I guess.
Yeah. It's the best we can all hope for, right?
Yeah. So, and I meant what I said, in that post that I sent y'all. I gave you kudos for trying to give both sides. And there's not anybody out there that has ever done that. And I don't know if it's because it's just here recently, it seems like within the last year or so that just numerous podcasts have popped up on this particular case.
Yeah, true crime is certainly has taken off in the last couple of years, and it seems like it was a huge case in your area, so I would suspect that you're going to get some more people to cover it, and it looks like you've had some pretty big names cover it, so I am a little surprised with a whole book out there that both sides weren't covered.
Well, that book was a labor of love, I guess you could say, because it wasn't written in a couple of weeks. It was written over about a period of 3 years. I think it was that I spent writing that book. So.
Yeah, I can't imagine. It was very detailed, and I would recommend to any of our listeners. We just really skimmed some of the evidence, but Trevor really goes into all of it and how the case was mishandled by police and by prosecution. And Trevor sent us 2 books. We're going to have a contest for the patrons, and we're going to also have one for anybody, just a raffle for anybody who actually listens. We'll post some of that on our socials for you guys to sign up to get a copy of his book. I would recommend it to anybody who's interested in learning about someone who, at least from our opinion, did not get a fair trial.
Yeah. And I do have to say that, book sales have been a whole lot better than I ever imagined them to be. I mean, it's not a 5 million book sale or anything like that, but I mean, the book sales have definitely been a lot better than I ever hoped for.
That's fantastic.
For a self-published book like that had no real publicity. Believe it or not, there was only one newspaper, and it was an online newspaper that did a story on the fact that the book was coming out. They just didn't care anything about it.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, every website that I read was like really awful about it's finally over and announcing that your dad
and don't be surprised if you get visit or y'all get visits on y'all's social media that are ugly, because I do have a fan base, but it's a fan base that likes to follow me around, and if I post one little blurb about it, it's usually the same people that call me this or call me
give
that.
You a hard time, give your dad a hard time. Yeah.
I care less. People can call me whatever they want to. It don't matter to me.
Right.
It ain't hurting me none. Matter of fact, I've told one of them, I mean, it's actually true. I mean, I'm not making it up. Every time they post it seems like my book sales go up. So.
Yeah, I hear that happen sometimes. Well, like we said, we're definitely not taking a side, but we did want to give you a space to tell your story and your dad's story and talk about your book. But we really, really appreciate you coming on, and we appreciate you reaching out to us, even though it did give our hearts a little jolt there that first day we saw that you listened to the podcast. But we do appreciate your time and working with me and getting you on. It's been interesting and eye-opening for both of us, for sure.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Trevor. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Trevor.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Trevor shares a lot of things, and we kind of bounce around some ideas, right? Mm-hmm. And basically, the whole premise of his book is he's taking his personal experiences, the things that he knows about his dad, the things that he knows about the town, the history of the town. Just all of these things are compiled. That together with the court papers and the court evidence, everything. Yeah. Right. And we talked about, before Dana rudely didn't record, we talked about how the title of the book is really apropos to the book, because statement of facts is what you would present in court.
Right.
Right. As you gathered the evidence, these are the facts, right? The statement of fact, the title of the book is he's really matter-of-factly stating this is what was presented to court. And if you go by that, if you read the book, which I highly, highly recommend, it should be a case study in what not to do when you have a murder trial.
Right.
A capital murder trial.
Yeah, I mean, and we sort of are bouncing all around just because it's a Zoom call and sometimes that can be difficult, but the evidence was mishandled.
Yeah.
The evidence was not properly cared for over time.
Right. The scene was not
secured.
The witness testimonies were shoddy at best.
Right. The way Unsolved Mysteries and TV shows have handled the case, and
one big takeaway for me is that when you watch Unsolved Mysteries and they present somebody as a possible suspect, and then they use a character, an actor that looks like one of the suspects that the police have in mind, it's almost 100% certain that the people are going to be swayed to think, well, there he is. There's the guy. That's our guy.
Right. And it did seem like when you lined up all the witnesses, they go through this whole thing with the witnesses. The whole thing in his book is he's saying the way when you interview a witness and you set them up like with the pre-trial interview,
right,
you can tell that somebody has been coached in what to say, because they're all saying the exact same thing. A decade or more later, after they did not say that
in the originally, right, in the original testimony.
It's really, really interesting. You know, again, we were not there, or sit in the court case, and we don't have an opinion. The fact remains, Frank Casteel was proven guilty over and over and over again, and died in prison. But it is fair to say, after reading this book, that he did not get a fair shake.
In any of the circumstances,
in any
that
way,
he got.
shape, it didn't seem like he had lawyers that really did their job for him,
right?
And he makes a case for that in the book, and it sounds like some certainly tried, but really, like, how can they when you're in a small town and you're an up-and-coming lawyer or whatever, and you're literally fighting against your neighbor, you know?
Exactly.
It really calls into question how we have this justice system set up. And
well, it's scary to think that if you're in a small community where everybody knows each other, and the few people that are, you know, the successful people in the town can all get together and collectively say, you did something.
Yeah.
And
I mean, that's like my biggest fucking nightmare.
Oh, yeah.
And I mean, and it happens all the time.
Yeah, if enough people get together,
if
enough people get together and say, you did something. And the law is against you.
Right.
You know, the law enforcement, the local law enforcement is against you, then you're doomed.
I mean, and also, like, this sort of calls into question, like, the guilty by media, you know, like the media and the police and the people in the town. And this is just one case. We've seen this with the Central Park 5, or like, you know, whatever. There's so many cases that we can, like, point to really easily where, like, people were like, you did this thing, and then it took DNA evidence to turn around and be like, no, that actually didn't happen, in 40 years of someone's life were wasted, and it's fucked up.
Exactly.
It's fucked up. We got a flawed fucking system there.
This case, and I know that in the last episode, we kind of, like, bickered a little bit. We kind of got, you know, under each other's skin a little bit.
Yeah.
Because I wanted you didn't know my perspective. You didn't know my side.
Right.
And I was like, but regardless of whether you believe that he's guilty or not, regardless of whether in your heart of hearts you're like, well, he's guilty, I don't care.
Yeah.
The trial was not fair.
Right.
It just wasn't.
Right.
So, I mean, no disrespect to the families and to the victims or anything like that, but it wasn't a fair trial. If he didn't get a fair trial, then that would mean that somebody got away with the crime.
Right.
You know, and that's where I have an issue.
One, yeah.
Oh, yes, a very violent crime.
A very violent
one.
Right,
and that's where the issue, you know, really lies. You know?
That's always where the issue lies, right? Yeah. Because who's to say that this person doesn't go to commit another crime, you know?
I really recommend you read this book, because you will be like, wait a minute, this guy was perfect for it.
Yeah.
There's so many, well, not really so many.
No, there's a couple good.
There's a handful of people that were way more... First of all, that we had witnesses' account of them being at the site, right, and that were so much better for it. And then the fact that they load the Jeep and the ATVs don't fit in his Jeep.
Yeah, we're gonna share some pictures of the actual ATV in the actual Jeep, and some other pictures I think he sent, maybe of him and his brother and his dad. I think is who it is. But just seeing the ATV in the back of that Jeep Scrambler, it just makes no way that
there's no way. There's no way that it fits. The half of the freaking ATV is hanging off of the back of the thing.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And you're going to drive it 12 miles through rough roads? No. It ain't happening.
Yeah.
It ain't happening. And they tried to freaking stretch
Not like
it.
An older guy who's got a back end. Like, there's just no way.
There's just no way. And he's like in his 50s at this point. No, there's just no way that he could lift 300 pounds three times.
Those bikes are huge. Those tires are huge. Yeah.
And it's covered in blood. He's not transferring blood. The ATVs were covered in blood.
Right.
He's not transferring it onto the Jeep.
Right.
I mean, it makes no sense.
Yeah, the ballistics, the guns, like all of it is real questionable.
This case, if you are a true crime aficionado, where you enjoy these mystery cases. Oh my God. Where you enjoy a good mystery. This book is definitely worth a listen. We're giving one away. We're giving
2 away.
Yeah, we're giving 2 away. We'll share that at the end. Read it. Check it out, and then watch City Confidential. Watch
No, it was Bloodlands and Unsolved Mysteries.
It was on City Confidential.
Oh, it was on.
too.
Yeah, okay.
And it was also on Unsolved Mysteries. Watch those episodes. See how they portray it. Listen to a couple podcasts that have covered it.
Yeah, there's some
biggies.
If you put Signal Mountain Murders, you can listen to some other podcasts.
Yeah.
Some podcasts that have covered it. And they do not, no one talks about his book.
Nope.
No one talks about him
Right.
or any potential that he might be innocent.
Right. And then listen to his book, which, like I said, he had to pay for court transcripts. We're like $4,000 or something to get the actual court transcripts. Listen to the book and then, like, pick it apart. It was almost like a puzzle.
Yeah.
It was really, I don't want to say that this was a fun case, but it was a really interesting
It was
case.
certainly an eye-opening look at what we are doing. Like, it really was just like this eye-opening, like, wow, I've been watching Forensic Files since before fucking Forensic Files was like the cool thing to watch when you went to sleep. I've been watching that shit for almost 20 years.
Right.
And, you like hear this case and you take it as fact. It is what it is. Like,
right.
And that's just by and large for the justice system in general. Like, if someone is convicted of a crime, you're like, okay, guess they did it.
Right.
Like,
they must have done it.
Right. And you just really don't listen to it a little bit deeper. And it's,
right.
I mean, today I was like Googling, I was trying to find his website. He used to have a website. It's closed now because he has this book. But I was trying to find it and I got to Reddit. And Reddit, I read this whole thing and I'm like, this is wrong. It's not accurate what you're saying.
Right.
And it is, and that's like, I don't want to be like Reddit is the place, right? But Reddit is the place where you will get like both sides of the coin sometimes, you know what I mean? Like
most of the time.
Yeah, like where people will be like, no, what about this? No.
Right.
And Trevor's on Reddit, like out here fighting the good fight for his dad's, his dad's name.
But he also points out that there's a good old boy system.
Sure.
And
I mean, that's the problem.
And in the
everything.
80s, there was a great old boy system,
Right.
And so, his dad got railroaded. At least in the legal sense.
Yeah.
At least in the legal sense, he got railroaded.
Right.
It was just...
It was unfair.
Just, if anything proves that there was reasonable doubt, look at the picture of the Jeep with the ATV in the back.
Yeah.
That's all you need.
No way. Yeah.
That's all you need to see. Anyway. So, thank you for listening to
sides
us.
Or anything.
Yeah, no, but I mean, it's just whatever. I'll take a fucking side. I don't think he did it.
There's certainly reasonable doubt that he didn't.
Just based on the fact that there was reasonable doubt.
There's reasonable doubt, and that's the way our justice system works.
That's right. Meh.
Right.
So, we hope you've come away with something.
Yeah.
And
thanks for sticking with us. This is a different. No, we don't usually always have an episode this way, but.
Right, because usually we're like, oh no, the killer, you need to burn. Yeah, but this time we're like, maybe he didn't do it.
It is interesting for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, go check out the book. I recommend it highly. Go check us out on Patreon. We have more stuff over there. And right now we are going to be doing a giveaway.
Trevor sent us some books. You can go on social media. Cindy's going to have a raffle.
Yes, there's going to be a raffle. You complete the form, you get on the list, and I'll throw your name in the list.
Yeah, and we'll just have like a random giveaway for Trevor's book. And and if you don't win, go buy his book because it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, and it's on Audible too.
Yeah, I listened to it on Audible.
Yeah.
And it was an easy listen. Like, I mean, in a day and a half, I listened to the whole thing.
Yeah,
so.
yeah.
But you should check it out.
I enjoyed it because I was just like, get the.
Yeah, I hate this kind of shit.
What? Get the. I just kept doing that because I'm remodeling the bathroom, so I was like listening to it. I listened to it a second time.
Yeah.
And I was just like, and even my boyfriend, every once in a while, he would pass by. He's like, I gotta listen to that book. But he would pass by while I was listening to it, and he'd be like, no way.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yes.
It's crazy.
Yes. Yep. That's it for us. We'll check you out next week. In the meantime, you can go check us out on Patreon or Facebook or Instagram or Twitter or call us or email us or smokestack, whatever.
Whatever you want to do.
Yeah. Don't get taken to the second location, okay, guys?
Okay, cheers.
Okay, bye.
Are you okay? Jesus Christ.
Fucking loud.
You're disgusting and I hate you both. God.
I'm crying laughing and holding my pee because I almost fucking peed myself.